for any topic you want to hear interesting people talk about, there is an episode, but it's just extremely difficult to find what that exact episode.
Welcome to Partner Path, a podcast that unpacks the venture capital and growth equity ecosystem from a junior perspective. Young entrepreneurs and investors have already had a massive impact on the industry, having started unicorns and launched billion-dollar funds. We discuss these success stories and more by sharing perspectives and advice from some of the industry's most prominent role models. This podcast expresses our views as of the date published and does not represent the views of and is not endorsed by any company for which we work. Before we get to the episode, Laura and I are excited to announce a partnership with Overlap. Fresh out of Y Combinator's summer batch, Overlap is an AI-driven app that uses large language models to curate the best moments from podcast episodes. Imagine having a smart assistant who reads through every podcast transcript, finds the best parts or parts most relevant to your search, and strings them together to form a new, curated stream of content. That is what Overlap does. I personally use Overlap to explore content on future podcast guests and highly recommend it as another diligence tool for investors. Check out Overlap on the App Store today.
Today we're talking with Jonathan Baer, co-founder and CEO at Overlap. Jonathan started his career in public policy at Meta before going back to business school. Mid-2023, Jonathan launched Overlap, the Perplexity for video and audio content. Welcome, Jonathan.
Great to be with you both.
So you've worked at a number of jobs in public policy and government after studying PPE at Penn, which was also my major, and then you made the transition into tech. So maybe just talk about this transition and any kind of influences or experiences that influenced the move.
Yeah, I forgot you were a PPE major also. It's
the best major
It's
at
important.
Penn.
It is the best. Yeah, sorry.
It's 3-in-1.
But it is the best, by far the best major at Penn.
Yeah. Prefer business.
Yeah, so PPE at Penn was amazing. During that time, I was really interested in public policy in particular. Kind of as you mentioned, I worked at policy and Meta right after Penn. And in college, I worked on Capitol Hill one summer. I worked at the Federal Trade Commission one summer. And kind of the thing that I was most interested in was this intersection of tech and public policy and how new technologies, new platforms set in this regulatory gray area. And it was a fascinating time. I mean, it was like when Uber was taking off, when Airbnb was taking off. There were a lot of interesting questions around data privacy at that time. Also, AI was a little bit in the ether, but not as much as it is now. I did a lot of work at Penn around tech and public policy, and then went to Meta, where I had a really fascinating experience.
What does public policy or this type of role entail at a tech company like Meta?
Yeah, I had a really weird role at Meta because I was the youngest person on the US policy team. And what it ended up being was I was really involved in preparing executives to testify in front of Congress. So my very first day at Meta, which I still call it it's hard for me to say Meta, but I still use Facebook. But my very first day there, 10 a.m. meeting, was brought into a conference room, and people were, and at the time my boss was like, all right, we just found out that Russian ads were bought during the 2016 election. We need to figure out how to brief members of Congress about this. So start drafting up a briefing memo, work with the legal team, work with the lobbyists. It was like that right away. And then my 3 years there was just nonstop that. But the craziest part was during Cambridge Analytica scandal, when I was part of the team that prepared Mark to testify in front of Congress.
Yeah.
And we prepared Cheryl numerous times to testify in front of Congress. And what that looked like was me researching and talking to lobbyists and a whole range of people around what each member of Congress is interested in, what possibly they could ask, what our answers could be, and talking a lot of internally to people at the company around what the company, kind of what happened at the company and what the company's position are and were at the time.
Yeah.
And then getting the executives to have sharp answers.
Yeah. I'm sure buying, Russian Facebook ads was not the top of your list when you were expecting to start?
No. I mean, I thought I'd be working on like net neutrality issues and things like that. And it was like hardcore, like brutal public policy, congressional relations fights. But it was an amazing experience. I think it's been really interesting in retrospect because like public opinion seems to have turned back in favor of Meta. There was this period kind of when I was there where like everyone was like, they are the big evil tech company.
Yeah.
And now it seems, especially as like they've led open source AI wave, that people now have a more favorable view of Meta, which like at the company, everyone thought that was going to be, there's going to be a moment where it's going to kind of like subside, the negativity will subside, and it like finally has.
Yeah.
But at the time it was crazy. Everyone thought the company ruined democracy. So
Was it correlated with Mark's attire shift?
yeah, honestly, there's a big part of that. He's
Maybe
got
a little bit of share buyback.
the share buybacks. You know, they're shooting dividends now, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And he's cool. And he like actually is more stylish.
He's relatable.
He is relatable.
Yeah.
He is relatable. And I think like, you know, I obviously like I didn't know him like well, but like internally, and I think with people who knew him, they always kind of knew he was like, they knew that side of him. And he was like pretty cool and casual behind the scenes. But then when he would get in front of cameras, he was a little bit more robotic. And so there was this huge contrast between him in private and him in the public eye. And now I think that's finally gone away, that contrast, where he's now more of himself in public.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So then you quick pivot out of policy into GSB. So maybe chat about the intent for going to GSB and if the intent was to start a company.
I mean, the intent to go to business school was absolutely to start a company. Being at Meta, it was great to be in that role, in that space, at that company. But I knew I wanted to start something myself, and I couldn't be in big tech forever because it's bureaucratic at times, and like, you know, you're just part of a big machine, and I wanted to do something smaller, and I wanted to lead something. So I went to business school with the goal of starting a company. And, you know, I think MBAs sometimes get a bad rap, but like I loved my experience at GSB, both because of like the network that it gives you, and then also some of the professors who like I remain super close with have like become really great, just like mentors and advisors to me. So it was totally a fantastic decision, and it was the right decision because like I had the goal of starting a company, and that's what I did.
Yeah.
What specifically about it helped you propel into the company or like prepare for being a founder?
I mean, part of it was that it like gives you time to like think about what kind of company you want to build and talk to a lot of people and plan out like what you want to do. But then also I think what it really is great for is like giving you confidence, because you have professors who are, at least for me, like, you know, two professors in particular were like, go do it, like just start now. And there's a lot of people who go into business school thought that, oh, I maybe want to start a company, and then they like don't do it. And so there's a lot of professors who like see that a lot, and they're like, at least at GSB, we're like, go start a company. And so, and like the idea that you can do it, and there are a lot of other people who do it, and the thing that holds a lot of people back is just not doing it. It's just like not starting. Yeah. And that idea being like drilled in to me by like certain people there gave me a lot of confidence. And then it builds, like, just business school in general, like it gives you kind of reps and like seeing a lot of business related issues and talking to a lot of people. And I think that one other part of the confidence thing is like in business school, seeing a lot of extremely impressive people come in and speak to us, I was like, oh, they're just people.
Yeah,
like, you know,
they're approachable. Yeah.
They're approachable. Like, even though they're like remarkable, like I remember like, you know, Brian Chesky, like coming in and speaking to like one of my classes, it's like, he's amazing, but it's like, oh, he's just some guy, you know, like, and so I think that helped a lot too.
I think it diversifies your learnings too, because being at Penn and PPE specifically, it's very policy focused or very business focused. So you don't have as much of the innate entrepreneurial spirit or people leaving to start companies. I mean, I think nowadays you're seeing more of it at Penn. But when we were there wasn't a ton of founders.
That's true. I mean, so my co-founder, he dropped out of Stanford undergrad. And it's just funny, like, talking to him, like, he has a bunch of friends who dropped out. And I'm like, at Penn, I actually had one friend who didn't even, I mean, he like took a year off to like work on a company, but like, I don't know. Do you guys have friends who dropped out?
I don't think I had any friends that dropped out of Penn, but it's funny we went down this kind of tangent because Laura and I have had other Stanford undergrad founders on the podcast before, John Curiazzi and others. And we like to ask, what is it about Stanford? Is there something innate in the campus or the culture that helps cultivate founders and results in more companies being founded? And I think the common thread that I've heard is almost like a sense of being naive and like false confidence that it kind of ensures in people. And it gives people the confidence to go out and do something on their own, right? It's taking a big leap of faith, but it gives you the network and resources and really just the confidence to go out and do it. So it's interesting to hear that exists at the MBA level as well.
I think that's it. It is like the confidence. And that comes from just like being in Silicon Valley and just like you inevitably meet a lot of people who have done that and succeeded. Mm-hmm. And they're all impressive people, but at the same time, you're like, they're not otherworldly impressive, like they're amazing, but they're not that different.
Yeah. Walk us through the genesis of Overlap. You're on Stanford campus, maybe you're listening to some podcasts, thinking of company ideas and trying to figure out how can you find new podcasts, or walk us through how did you end up starting Overlap?
Well, so one experience I definitely had at GSB was I was listening to a lot of podcasts, consuming a lot of like YouTube content, which I have always done.
Yeah.
And I was also learning a lot in the classroom, but I found myself like learning a lot more from the podcasts I was listening to and these interviews that I was listening to.
Cover your Stanford professors.
That I was learning in the classroom, podcasts like Partner Path.
Yeah.
But it was both like I was learning so much more, and also like supplementing what I was learning in the classroom with this content that I was consuming. And talking to a lot of my classmates, they all wanted to do that, but very few of them knew how or had the time to do it. And a lot of that reason was because of the amount of content out there, how hard it is to discover the right moments within long form content, and how difficult it is to find curated content. And so that set me off on this journey to build a new platform that can take long form interview content and actually give you the moments that matter to you. This was also around the same time that ChatGPT came out. And I think one of the really interesting things about LLMs and at that moment was like, all right, these models can produce text information, but I think what's even more interesting than that is that they can take in text information. And podcasts or long YouTube videos they can all be turned into transcripts. So there was this opportunity. Not only was there this need and demand for this, but there was this technology shift that was just starting that I thought could open the doors of opportunity.
Yeah. Something we've heard you say before is talking about the golden age of niche podcasts and trying to understand, is this kind of along the lines of podcast discovery, or where do you think we sit as far as the podcast journey?
There's like 5 million active podcasts right now.
Yeah.
So much of the consumption is like concentrated at the top 0.1% of them.
Right.
A lot of them aren't good, but there are so many amazing ones that don't get listened to because they get buried on podcast apps that are RSS feed based or on YouTube. And so, you can learn about anything from there's a podcast episode or a YouTube video for anything you want to learn about.
Yeah.
Or for for any topic you want to hear interesting people talk about, there is an episode. But it's just extremely difficult to find what that exact episode.
Or where it is in an episode.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is like, especially talking to a lot of younger consumers, like that's one of the things about podcasts that like turns them off is the length. Maybe an old man, but like I like long form content, but like that's not where the podcast industry is going. And like younger people in particular, like just want the moments that matter to them.
Yeah.
They don't want to like listen to a 2-hour long episode.
Yeah. Cough, TikTok and
Exactly.
Instagram reels, right?
Well, like I think actually what's super interesting about the podcasting is like more people consume podcast content via short form video on social platforms than they do via like long form audio. Because if anyone opens up their TikTok feed or their reels or YouTube shorts or Twitter, like you will see video podcast clips. And that's like increasingly becoming the primary way that people consume podcast content.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now, a quick word from our sponsor. Laura and I are thrilled to announce a partnership with Grata, an intuitive deal sourcing and diligence platform. Keep missing out on private market deals? Ditch the Rolodex and get Grata. Grata's AI-powered platform provides accurate data, deep insights, and time-saving workflows that help get more deals done. And it's trusted by over 500 firms and 3,000 deal makers, including myself. I've personally used Grata in both my deal sourcing and diligence workflows and would recommend their tool to any investor across private equity, growth equity, corp dev, or investment banking. We've negotiated a special offer for our audience. Mention PartnerPath to the Grata team during sign-up, and you'll get free executive seats for your partners and MDs included in your subscription. Now, back to the episode.
You're processing a lot of content, and some podcast episodes are 3-4 hours, Joe Rogan. How are you like chunking it into the important parts and then sharing that information and making sure that it is the important parts?
What we do is we use this open source speech to text model that turns it into this really great transcript. And then we run that transcript through multiple LLMs. And what my co-founder built is this team of AI agents that is each specifically focused on doing one thing related to the transcript to turn it into clips. Like one is focused on a really good starting point. One is focused on a really good ending point. One is focused on making sure there's relevant context in a segment. One is focused on making sure the segment has potential for virality. And so each of these AI agents is working on the transcript to pull out these relevant moments. And then it shoots out timestamps that then we cut into a clip for a specific user.
Okay. What are the different models you're using?
So we actually just rebuilt it on O1, which is mostly on O1, but we've used for Turbo, for Mini, Claude Sonnet, Gemini for various different tasks related in that LLM flow. But we are now mostly using O1 actually. My co-founder last week was in this OpenAI hackathon that gave us like complete access to O1, which like right now it's only in preview mode publicly. So we have the first like LLM based clipping algorithm that turns long form content into short form content that's built on O1. And so it's so much better than all the alternatives.
Yeah.
And it's super fast, super accurate, gives you really amazing moments.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great segue to try and understand what your competition is. Who do you view as your competition? Is this something that like an Apple Music or a Spotify would build internally? Obviously, you guys are cross-platform, so would love to hear your thoughts there.
For the listeners, so we have two products. We have this consumer-facing product, and then we have a creator-facing product. For the consumer-facing product, it's very much Perplexity for video and audio content that you can go in, prompt it with anything you're interested in, and then it will cut clips from you from long-form video and audio episodes about whatever you want to learn about. And for that, we're very much competing with YouTube, Spotify, anywhere where people spend time passively consuming content. On the creator side, and we've started to invest more time and resources into this, creators like yourselves can drop in long form episodes and then immediately get clips that you can put out on social media. And for that, there's like a whole bunch of companies who do that type of service, which maybe you guys have used, which we should talk about. But for us, like, we're just way better than those ones because we're built on the latest model. And then also we make it really easy to generate content using LLMs around those video clips.
Yeah, I've tried about 10 today. They're all pretty clunky. I think there's two issues. One, it can't ingest the memory or the length of the episodes. And then two, when it does and it spits out the clips, they're not the most relevant. So then you have to cut the clips yourself. But then the user interface is like pretty clunky to cut the clips.
Yeah.
And then you want to add captions as well. So it's quite a process where it's almost quicker just go through the episode and just share timestamps. But to be fair, I think these are just one-off side projects that people are doing.
Totally.
So I don't think they're probably just using, an older model or maybe not a model at all.
A lot of them are projects, and they're not like real products. But, for us, like, what we realize is like this technology that we built for the consumer side has started to become really valuable or applicable for creators who want their clips. Because a lot of creators would go on the app, see clips from their show, and then be like, how do I get this clip and post it on my social platform? Because, like, as you two know, that's table stakes for podcasters in today's world, is like putting out video clips.
That's how you can grow.
It's how you grow. So then we built this creator-facing tool, this web app that allows you to like drop in YouTube links and get your clips. But yeah, I want to show you the latest version of it so you can
try it
test
here.
ours out. Yeah.
And what are some of the interesting use cases that you've seen on the consumer side of things? I'm curious to get your perspective because I have a strong view on some interesting use cases.
One use case that I think we've talked about was investors doing due diligence on companies or executives and wanting to find information that is really buried and locked in long podcast episodes that isn't really readily available. And we've seen investors using overlap for due diligence.
Yeah.
We see a lot of, especially young people, preparing for interviews with overlap. So they'll go in, prompt it with a topic that could come up in an interview, and they'll use it as this preparation system. And then we find a ton of young people, 16 to 24-year-olds, who are intellectually curious, just getting into business content and like listening to podcast content. And they want this kind of short form way to consume it, but they don't really want to listen to long episodes. They don't like TikTok because TikTok makes them feel stupid, and they want something more intellectually stimulating.
Yeah.
Those users are using overlap a ton. And so we've taken off in these college campuses across the country, like randomly and unexpectedly, because we've gotten into like the undergrad business club, and everyone's like, ooh, like this is a great way to like learn about AI and learn about all of these new topics, or learn about investing, because there's so much knowledge that is buried in the podcast ecosystem, and overlap finally surfaces it for you.
Yeah, well, that's certainly part of the goal of PartnerPath. So it's glad to hear that that's taking off in the podcast realm. And obviously you can check out PartnerPath on overlap.
Yep.
But I do want to dig into the investor use case just briefly, because as a growth equity investor myself, I've used Tegas and find it extremely helpful. People pay a lot of money, one, to do expert calls and talk to more senior folks. Usually the more senior or experienced the person, the more expensive it is. Mm-hmm. Like it's usually $1,000+ an hour to talk to an executive or founder, right? To ask them questions about their business or get their perspective on a market. And Tegas is a platform that provides transcripts of past calls, and people pay thousands of dollars per month per seat just to get this information that's text about a conversation with a high-ranking person. Yeah. Well, a lot of those conversations exist in the podcast realm.
Totally.
Right?
They're free and publicly available.
Yeah. But no one really accesses them. This is, to me, an incredible unlock to go check out if you're looking at investing in Databricks. How many damn podcasts has Ali Ghodsi done? Or investors of Databricks that talk about the business and their thesis around investing. There's so much information that's proprietary to this channel and platform that is really not unlocked. And so I'm glad to hear that people are using Overlap to unlock it.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we maybe need to start like competing and going head to head with Tegas and undercutting them.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, because it's true. Like you can find information from experts if you know how to curate what's publicly available in the podcast ecosystem well.
Yeah.
And you don't need to do these expert calls or whatever. It's like all of these people are on interviews. They're on these shows, and it's just a matter of like curation.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's information you can't find other places.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They mention something live and all of a sudden it's out there, right?
Totally.
Like maybe it's their Q2 ARR number and no one else is told people about it, right?
Yeah.
It hasn't been published. So I think it's fascinating.
So maybe we can do a quick pivot to YC that you just wrapped up this batch. And there's, I mean, thousands of applicants to each YC batch. It's very competitive. What do you think made you stand out? And I will say, like, this batch was heavily weighted towards more of the DevOps world and AI, which you are AI. But why do you think more as a consumer, creator-facing app, like they chose Overlap?
Yeah, I mean, we're one of, maybe 10 consumer companies in my batch. Like there were not a lot of consumer companies.
And how many companies a batch are there?
I don't know, 200 or so.
Oh, really?
250.
Yeah.
Around
Wow.
there.
Something like that.
And you're in groups
Yeah,
of
and
like
you're in-
50-ish.
Exactly. So yeah, so there's the batch, which is like 200, 250-ish. Then you're in a group, which is like 50 or so. And then you have a section, which is like 10. Like 10 or so. And all the companies in my section were consumer AI companies. I think one thing that helped us stand out is there's definitely a feeling among a lot of YC partners that this is a new wave of consumer. So like our partner was Gary Tan, and he's like, consumer's been dead for 5 years. AI is finally going to usher in a new era of consumer companies. So he's actively looking for interesting consumer ideas. And then also for him, like he's a big podcast. He has many podcasts. He's a big YouTuber. He, in particular, this problem and how we were approaching it just registered with him. So, he took an interest to it. And our interview process was very much him like, well, first he was like, can you show me like a demo that looks like this? And then in our interview, and so like she said this before the interview, so we had to like build this new demo for him for the interview.
Yeah.
Which I think was just a test to be like, can these guys build shit fast? And then the interview's like 15 minutes of like 5 minutes of us showing a demo, and then 10 minutes of him asking questions. And it was a little bit of a last minute thing to apply to YC and try to do it, and I'm super happy we did.
Why lean in or why lean out? Who is YC a good fit for?
I think YC's a really good fit for any pre-seed, seed range tech company, like period, because similar to like GSB, like what was so great about it was like the community that you get, and like you're around just really smart people for basically 3 months who are working really hard and doing amazing things. I would highly recommend it. I loved the experience. Definitely if you're a technical team who's like early in the company life cycle, do YC.
What were some of the core elements or tangible examples where they move the needle for Overlap, would you say?
A big part of how it moves the needle is that like every other week you're with your section and you have goals. You have like 2-week goals.
Yeah.
And they just throw up everyone's 2-week goals. And then you go around and it's like, did you hit your goal?
Some accountability.
Yeah, there's just so much accountability. And, you see who hit their goals and who didn't. And then they say, why didn't you hit your goal? Or like, what'd you learn after hitting your goal? And you just need to like talk through it with everyone. And that's amazing. And that's like an incredible accountability mechanism.
Yeah.
And then the partners there are like, have obviously just like seen a million startups over the last decade. And so they just have a lot of great advice and wisdom. And then it's really helpful, like leading into your seed round, like demo day just is like, makes it much easier to raise a seed than any other way to raise a seed.
Yeah.
Around demo day.
There's some companies who raise before YC. A lot of people raise like at the end of YC before demo day. Okay. So in the last like month or so of YC, even before demo day, they'll start to raise. And we started to do that a little bit. I mean, we didn't finish our round before demo day, but there's companies who like totally finish their round before demo day.
Typically, what should a startup founder expect as far as investment from YC? What's the financial element of it?
It's a standard like deal that they give all the companies, which is $125K safe that converts into 7%. Your priced round, and then there's a 375 uncapped safe that converts, or it's a 375 uncapped safe with a MFN, so it kind of converts to whatever you end up raising at after YC. But it's a 500K investment. You know, at our first priced round, they'll get a little over 7% of the company, which is a lot, but I found it to be totally worth it. I feel very indebted to YC and just like how hard they pushed us, how great they were, how much they accelerated our progress.
Yeah.
So the 7%, like to people thinking about YC, I think it's totally worth it. At the same time, it's a great deal for YC. Like they're getting a great deal, but it's still totally worth it from the founder perspective too.
Is there any room for negotiation from the founder, or is the only difference between Overlap and the next AI chatbot, whatever startup, what they raise their next round at?
There's no, for like the YC deal, they're like
It's standard.
It's super standard.
Yeah.
But then what you raise at demo day is totally market dependent.
Did you consider any other accelerators outside of YC? It's been a hard model over the last few years, but there's still some niche accelerators. They're pretty strong.
I'm sure there are. We didn't consider other ones, but there are tons of like accelerators that I think are worth founders' time, because I think the really big value is like getting in a community of other founders like at the same, roughly stage of the company. I think it's really valuable, but I don't know. We just ripped in an application to YC and it worked out.
Yeah.
Do you find value add post YC now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things they really emphasize during the batch is like your YC experience doesn't end with when a YC ends, like when the batch ends, because they have this, like they've something called Bookface, which is like the internal like YC community, which is kind of like the internal Facebook for just YC founders.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources. Like it is this thing where like a YC founder reaches out to you, even if you didn't know them, not in the same batch, like you'll still kind of be like, oh yeah, like I'll talk to this person.
It's called Bookface.
Bookface, yeah.
As opposed to Facebook.
It's called Bookface. It's really cool, actually. It's a great like resource. And a lot of the community stuff, and like during the batch, you're working so hard that like you don't get to meet everyone in the batch that you really want to, or like get close enough with everyone. But after the batch, I think that's when that really starts to happen, because most of them are just in San Francisco and there's a lot of alumni events and stuff like that.
Do you think you need to be in San Francisco to build an AI company today?
I don't think you need to be. I think it helps a lot. There's a big talent density in San Francisco, which isn't to say you totally need to be. But, from my perspective, you want to do everything that gives you an extra couple percentage points of succeeding. And I think being in San Francisco does increase your odds of success. And like, I remember there was a YC partner who like on the last day, like showed everyone the stats of like companies who stay in San Francisco and companies who leave. And companies who stay in San Francisco were 2 times more likely to succeed. Or I think it was like 2 times more likely to reach a Series A, and then like 2 times more likely to also be a unicorn. It was like a lot of really interesting stats around that.
Yeah. Which
they showed us on the last day, which is funny because like a lot of companies like had already planned to move back to New York or wherever else they were going. But yeah, I think there's a real advantage of being in San Francisco. And it sounds like you're moving to San Francisco too.
Yeah. We can do a quick fire if that works for you.
Yeah.
What's a YC company, one YC company, I know there's many, but that people should be paying attention to right now?
Only one.
You only get one shout out.
Besides overlap.
Yeah.
What's a really good... People should check out Tandem, which I don't know if you guys know about, but it's like an office sharing company. And they're kind of doing WeWork, but without the bad things about WeWork. And like they're matching, it's not even really WeWork, but it's like they're matching companies who are hybrid or like, you know, have some of their workforce remote. They're matching 2 or 3 companies into an office space and then building the office space for them. And they're like getting tons of traction. So they're a really interesting company. It's hard to pick one. Now there's like 10 that like come to mind, but Tandem is like a great team, great product. They're a company to look out for.
What's a founder you admire?
Oh, I see. Like in my batch or in general?
Any founder.
Any founder. I really admire Brian Chesky. And the reason for that is like, what I really love about him, and like, I mean, he spoke to my class in business school. He also spoke to like our YC batch, but like both times what stood out to me was his like vulnerability and honesty. And I love that he's like, every time I'm like, wow, this guy just like put his heart on his sleeve. And I love that he gives a good show, like wherever he goes and whenever he speaks. I remember, you know, another person who spoke to my business school class was Steve Ballmer, like the former Microsoft CEO and Clippers owner now. But like, he just he was so energetic, so crazy. And then after, the professor was like, he gives a great show. And like, that's, Brian Chesky has a lot of that, of like, when he speaks, it feels like this performance. And I love that aspect of it. And then I also think what is great about him is that he really puts design to the forefront of Airbnb, which is something that's really important. And I think, you know, in the tech industry, sometimes engineering is at the forefront or other things. And I think putting design high on a pedestal is super important.
What's the hardest part about fundraising?
The hardest part about fundraising is the investors. Saying this to
Come on,
investors.
we're not.
No, I mean, I think it's definitely something that can be gamed a little bit, and there's a way to do it well. The hardest part, like from an emotional level, is like getting on a call or like meeting someone who has just like not thought about your business for 2 seconds and then ask questions that are not good questions or like show a ignorance of the space, and you just need to
get them up to speed.
You need to get them up to speed, and you got to like show patience with. And so there's, you know, that's something that isn't always fun to do. But yeah, fundraising is it's ultimately like fine and just like a necessary part of building a company. But that also being said, like there are some fundraising conversations I've had which like didn't lead to necessarily them investing, but like there like was a really interesting conversation, and like it was a relationship that like is going to continue regardless of like if we're working together.
Yeah.
What's your favorite podcast at this point in time?
My favorite podcast at this point in time is probably, I've been listening to a lot of BG2, which is the Bill Gurley, Brad Gerstner podcast.
That's great. Yeah.
They're
awesome.
I've been crushing that.
This is aside from Partner Path, obviously.
This is aside from Partner Path, which I listen on 2x speed every day.
Yeah.
But yeah, that one's great.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. Well, this has been such a fun conversation, Jonathan. And I really appreciate you coming on and chatting, and also being a supporter of Partner Path as well. So,
my favorite podcast.
Here we go.
Thanks.